My name is Richard Galley. I'm the owner of the property. It is the only property in the Venice area that I own, and I very much like Venice and want to be a part of making it a better community. And I do think this building does that. And since the appeal, we've heard what the community said, and in fact, we've even reached out to the community, and we tried to really respond to what the community is saying. And the first thing we did was completely enclose the building and try to take the noise issue off the table, if you will. Another thing that I've really heard a lot about, a lot of heartburn on, is the liquor license. And it would be good to have a CUB that had at least beer and wine. And if it made the application that much more acceptable to the commission, I'd be willing to ask for a CUB that was only beer and wine and not alcohol. And again, that's just something I'm willing to do to respond to the community. Currently the restaurant now, doesn't have alcohol and still does well. So I think it is possible to have a restaurant do well without it. So that would be okay with me. Also, in regards to that, I know there was some talk about hours of operation. I know that there's kind of a general hours of operation for restaurants in the area, and I'd be willing to live by that. I just don't want different hours than what other restaurants have been given. But I'm certainly not asking for extra, like I want to be open all night or whatever. Because in fact, I'm not seeking to do a bar, and obviously by giving up alcohol, I wouldn't be able to get it. And really what we're looking to do is to turn it into a sit-down restaurant. And, nicer restaurants, which is what this place would be, because we'd be fixing it up quite a bit and spending a lot of money on it. And I think people, take their time, take their time enjoying a meal there. So it's not going to be like a bar where you have a lot of traffic in and out and you have loud people. Finally, I'm willing to, there's also the issue that's come up a lot just about parking. I just want to say I did pay it in lieu of fees, $250,000. It's a lot of money. And I paid it with the idea that the city is supposed to take all the in lieu of fees from a lot of guys like me and is supposed to spend it on parking. And I think that's what the city should do. They should build a giant parking structure with all the in lieu of fees, because as a small property owner, it's impossible for me to do that. There's no way I can take the macro view and build a giant structure just to service my little thing. And there's no way for me to build a parking lot for 10 parking spaces either. It just can't be designed that way. So it does seem to make sense that you get all the people in the community that are building projects to pool their money and try to solve the problem that way. But again, in trying to make it acceptable to the commission, I'd be willing to accept the grandfathered floor area if that makes it more acceptable. At that, I just want everyone to know that we're listening to the community, responding to the community. I'm taking an old tired restaurant now, and I want to bring it up to code and make it a great structure. And we're willing to continue to take feedback from the community. If the current design is something a lot of people think isn't perfect, we take the feedback and we might make adjustments. But we have made the definite decision to completely close the building, so that should take the sound issue off the table. Also, just to clarify on the traffic report did, by making it a full sit-down restaurant, it actually has less trips than the way it is now. So I just want to make that clear.
Commissioner Donovan, the 140 vehicles that are going to hopefully, if on your side, come to visit your restaurant, where are they going to park?
Well, as I said, that's why I paid $250,000 to the city, and hopefully the city will solve that with my money and a lot of other people's money. But there's already people coming there now, and they're finding places to park now, so it's not like I'm really changing it. If anything, I'm creating less trips, so in theory there should be less cars looking for parking.
But essentially, unless the city builds a parking structure somewhere, they're going to park on the street.
That's correct, but the only way I could solve that would be just to close the building down and just have no business there.
Are you going to have valet parking?
Absolutely. If you're going to have a high-quality restaurant without any parking close by, you basically have to have valet parking.
So that's in the plans already?
It'd be something I would entertain. I mean, during certain hours and stuff, because it's not something you do all the time.
Where would you valet park to at this?
Actually, there's quite a bit of parking structures around that are within a couple of blocks, and that actually is quite viable. It was one way we even offered to take care of the parking, that I was willing to buy or lease additional spaces away from the property. And the problem is that all the available spaces are too far away for the city to accept. But they're not too far away for valet to drive down to and walk back from. And in fact, they do all the time. That's what valet service is all about. And that there is, in fact, a parking lot. I have to look at the map to show you where, but there is a parking lot not too far away that would be used for that. And in fact, that's the way a lot of these restaurants operate now in the area.
Commissioner Margulies, I wanted to ask you about the hours of operation and how you might be amenable to specifically, would you be amenable to limiting alcohol consumption to a smaller window within your hours of operation?
Well, sorry. Well, when you say alcohol, I mean beer and wine?
Yeah.
I would, yes. As long as it makes sense for the operation of the restaurant. The restaurant would only. I'll be looking at my team here a little bit. What are the times generally for the restaurant?
The firehouse runs closes at 11.
So yeah, I mean.
I'm actually more interested in when you would start serving, and I seem to recall that in our last hearing that the hours of operations. I see. Maybe I'm confusing cases, but I thought actually this was tied. The request was to serve alcohol for the entire period of operation, and that there was some justification for doing that. I see the hours. I believe I'm looking at. Let's see. It says in this report that Sunday. Let's see. Friday and Saturday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And I think the question that came up at our last hearing was, is it really necessary to serve alcohol at 7 a.m. Every day?
No, it wouldn't be, but it's nice to be able to, when an operator has certain hours he can operate, you can just say, hey, you can do your beer and wine during those hours. I doubt I would be, the operator would be selling much beer and wine at that time, but you never know, brunch, mimosa, I mean, again, I'm pulling it back from full liquor to beer and wine. So, if someone's going to have a champagne or a mimosa in the morning, I don't know, why not?
Okay. Can I ask the city attorney if this is something that we can condition as the hours of alcohol sales? Is that part of our purview here or not? We would be preempted from limiting the hours of operation for the sale of alcohol. We also cannot condition the applicant to only have wine and beer. That's within the jurisdiction of ABC.
Okay.
They can't. What we can do, you can limit the operations of the restaurant entirely, and you can make a recommendation to ABC. The city does have a process now to include recommendations to the ABC as to what the hours of operation, hours for the sale of liquor shall be.
Commissioner Dunn,
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm confused. We've seen the city condition beer and wine before, and it's not just through the ABC. Why couldn't we do that here?
Because ABC regulates what's appropriate to how to sell alcohol. What kind of alcohol sales are appropriate? That's within their purview. Our purview is.
But I've seen the city do that on numerous occasions.
And I understand that we have done that in the past. My advice to you is that that's something that's within the purview of ABC and not the city.
So I'd be willing to take input from the commission on this. This is not something that's, that big of an issue to the overall entitlement. We'd be willing to modify it to something that the commission would find acceptable. There are kind of standard hours that most of the restaurants in this area operate by, and that's pretty much all I'm looking for. I'm willing to modify it,
Mr. Commissioner Halper, Ms. Phelan, Kathy, this is all this new information coming in at this point. I'm wondering, can you make conditions, accept conditions, voluntary conditions in this manner?
Our advice, the city attorney's advice, is that we do not recommend that you impose voluntary conditions unless you can make the legal findings that the city could make to impose the condition in the first instance.
I'll tell you what, I'll make it easy. I'll apply for what you guys recommend. How about that?
Well, we have to make a decision this evening on this issue. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Actually, can I ask for a little bit of further clarification for everybody's edification here on the ABC process. So we have this hearing, and the applicant is willing to restrict his hours and make public testimony to that effect. After this, when does this case get heard by ABC, and what is the public input process? I would actually defer to planning staff for the exact process. Are you familiar with it? I know they have to have a hearing in front of ABC after this for their license.
Commissioner Down, that's an entirely separate process from what's conducted here. In other words, we could say everything's okay, and ABC could say none of it's okay.
Well, I think it's relevant just partly because the appellants have brought up some of the conditions of the ABC approval process and conditions that affect it. And I think we're clarifying that those are not conditions that we can recommend or rule on. And it's clear that there's another process and another timeline when those very relevant concerns will be heard. And I'd like to get an answer about whether that's an open public hearing and whether the community will be part of that process.
Theodore Urban City Planning. I'm not familiar with the process, and I have to agree with the other commissioners that it is kind of not something we get involved in. They handle that, they enforce it, they are armed to do the enforcement. We're here to regulate the site itself and the impact that the alcohol is going to have on the area. How they manage the sale of alcohol and who's selling it, and that is totally handled by ABC. They have their own process. They have to comply with that process. It's not something that the city delves into.
Commissioner Donovan,
The
also,
city,
I have
excuse me, the city
attended.
does have a public hearing. I apologize.
I
The city-
have
the
attended.
state does have a public hearing on that process.
Yes, I've attended those. Unless they've changed the rules, there will be a public hearing with ABC. Okay.
Can we just clarify the hours? This has just been resonant for Mr. Gottlieb. What he's proposing would be on the limitation of beer and wine serving would be from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. every night. That would be the limitation. Now, the restaurant itself may serve food beyond those hours, but that would be the limitation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's get back to we got a lot of speaker cards here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Olivia Hamilton.
The CEQA, there are still things on the CEQA that are not correct and have not been corrected since last time. One in particular, no reference is made to the historical monument, Mishkan Tabilo Temple or Synagogue. The noise is not addressed, the noise mitigation is not properly addressed on there. Public services, number 14B, regarding response times, acceptable service ratios, police services. The LAPD has very strongly weighed in that they cannot and will not provide extra service, and hence they do not want alcohol at that premises. All this should be noted, I believe, on the CEQA, as well as the aesthetics. It degrades the visual character. It is not in keeping with mass scale and character per the Venice specific plan, very obviously. Air quality, odours from trash were not addressed. I don't know about the odours from the restaurant, but they're already trashing by pouring toxic chemicals and refuse into the gutter, which goes into the ocean. So their future compliance is debatable, and the CEQA probably needs to be updated or redone in alignment with that. Regarding the neighbours, it was said that we're not in proximity of this. I am slightly out of the range, but we have neighbours who have been coming faithfully to these meetings. We're concerned with the cumulative impact on our neighbourhood, because one block each way makes a huge difference in a small community like Venice, only 3 square miles. I actually have 22 letters of neighbours who couldn't make it tonight. I'm not sure if it made it into your back packet, but if you wanted, you've got them? Okay, great. 15 of us were here, many immediate neighbours. 27 were represented from one gentleman who couldn't make it, and we just had 65 from the Homeowners Association from Venice Renaissance. So that's a substantial, that's, 90 or so people represented here. I also know, it's interesting, a lot of people have noted that all of their witnesses have left. Do they not care about the outcome? We very much care. We waited for 7 hours last time, so we care. Regarding alcohol, we're not against it. We're not against restaurants. They have a bar in the plans. If the applicant really wants to build a restaurant to add to the community, why don't you ask them if they would have a restaurant without alcohol, which is essentially what they've been doing here illegally already for the last 5 years. Regarding parking, valet parking, they have said absolutely they're going to have that. On their CUB application, it asks, will valet service be available? No. So they're here tonight saying yes, absolutely. And as was discussed at the January 7th hearing, they're planning on driving the cars down to the beach to park in public lots. Because there are no lots between here and between there and the beach, only street. So we are asking, well, we need to explain what's really going on here. This isn't a simple project changing the exterior of an old tired building. This is part of a much larger war. It's assault on Venice by developers. The MO is the same in each one of these type of projects. What they do in this case is they come in after having abused the laws for several, 5 years in this case, and they say, well, let's take this business and already existing and let's just make some small changes and then we'll just be good to go. That's what's been going on here, a business that's operated for 5 years illegally. The theory, we're just fixing up a tired building, doesn't wash. They're expanding use, they're expanding size, they're reducing the required parking, and they're adding alcohol consumption in an area that's already very, very crowded. In closing, we were joined tonight by many neighbours, as you've heard, who own properties in close proximity of the project, who are concerned for their quality of life and that of their tenants and their families, and rightly so. You've heard some very compelling arguments to support their position, as you did on the 7th of January. Are we to assume that one property owner of a substandard lot, 40 by 47 foot, at this location is to dictate how so many neighbours' lives would suffer? The project simply does not work at this location. It cannot fit here and at the same time protect the sanctity and the well-being of the existing adjacent residential neighbours in the process. Essentially, if you do not find favour in our appeal, you're suggesting one's making a buck is more valuable than the quality of life of so many Venetians. And this decision would set a precedent that is truly unthinkable. We believe that you'll take heart with our hard-working, creative family community and support us in protecting and preserving our rights to peace in our own homes and safety on our streets. We thank you for your attention and for your service to the community. I know you're private citizens like us. We respectfully, and you're doing a very good job and a very hard job, we respectfully request that you adopt the revised findings, grant the appeal, overturn the decision of the zoning and Director of Planning, and to not adopt mitigated negative declaration ENV 2013-2592 MND.
Thank you. Now we get to hear from our council office.
Good evening, Chris Robertson, Deputy Director of Land Use and Planning for Councilmember Mike Bonin of the 11th District. If you remember when this project was before you previously, we didn't take a position. However, we did sit through and listen to all the testimony, and we have since met with the applicant and the appellant. We are taking a position tonight. Both previously and tonight, we heard issues mainly related to noise, traffic, and parking, and how those issues affect the compatibility of the proposed use with the existing community. I'll start from the top and work my way down. We absolutely appreciate the applicant's effort to enclose the building. We do believe that would go a long way to address the noise concerns. However, we're still left with the fact that adding the second floor essentially doubles the size of the existing building, and we have no way to mitigate the additional traffic and parking impacts that would cause. Although the applicant and planning department believe that the use of in-lieu fees for this use is adequate, we respectfully disagree. Not only because the in-lieu fee is inadequate in and of itself, but we also have the fact that there is no area in the vicinity in which we could provide parking. So that's the first issue. Unfortunately, we cannot support the second story. The first floor, we have no problem basically legalizing what's there now. The restaurant has been in operation for quite some time, although it is unpermitted. I think it seems to be general consensus that the impacts associated with that would be negligible. I would ask one condition, and that would be that the applicant revise the floor plan to accurately reflect the service floor area. If you look at the floor plan now, the service floor area is depicted only around the bar and in a small area towards the front of the store. If you eliminate the stairway, that would be eliminated as a result of getting rid of the second floor. You're left with quite a bit of open space there that would be easily converted to sit-down bar tables and chairs. The planning department has determined that the applicant has 7 non-conforming parking credits that they could use, and parking is determined in this area based on service floor area, which gives them 350 square feet. We would just ask again that that be looked at, and I'm sure the applicant can address the specifics of that. Then we move towards the alcohol issue. We are not fundamentally opposed to allowing alcohol sales at this location. We understand that a restaurant, operating as a restaurant where someone goes and enjoys a glass of beer or a glass of wine, has very different impacts associated with it than a bar or a club would. So we started discussing what that might look like and how we could get to a position where we could ultimately support it. We talked about restricting hours to maybe 9:30 or 10 during the week, restricting hours maybe 10:30 or 11 on the weekend, eliminating the bar that's currently shown on the floor plan, and then eliminating the request for hard alcohol. Unfortunately, we could not get to a position to where we could support that because the applicant has been operating illegally for so long. With the permission to sell alcohol comes additional responsibilities. The city has a responsibility to inspect and enforce its conditions, and the applicant also has the responsibility to comply with the conditions and the law. Unfortunately, this applicant hasn't demonstrated a history of doing that, and so we would request that they come back perhaps within a year showing that they are complying with an approval. Granted, you approved something tonight. Show that they can do a good job, be a good neighbor, and then we can revisit the issue of beer and wine license only. I have spoken to this commission numerous times about our policy initiatives related to the in-lieu fee. I know we're running late and we still have another case to hear, so I won't get into those now, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Mr. Donovan, did you know they were going to wanted to close the rooftop before tonight?
We did, yes.
Okay, when did you know?
We met with them, I believe, Wednesday of last week.
Okay, a week ago.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're closing the public hearing. Just a quick question for staff. Did you know that they were going to close the rooftop or the roof?
Kevin Jones, Los Angeles City Planning. The plans indicated on here that there is a roof plan, so the building was to be enclosed. Mind you, that did not change the fact that we used the provisions that were outlined in the previous director's determination about height and service floor area. Service floor area can be either one, but when we reviewed the plans that were submitted to us on March 16th and then used for the consideration of the determination, we found that the new March 16th plans fully complied with the director's determination that had been previously issued. So the enclosure is an added fact and an added feature, but it in no way changes the provisions of the project permit compliance regarding the provisions of the specific plan.
Commissioner Donovan, so it's you didn't know about they were going to cover the roof until March 16th?
That is correct.
Okay. And what about this issue of the in-lieu fees? Are they going to entitled to ask for? I mean, I saw something that they put in $252,000, and now there's some indication that they could ask for a refund.
Commissioner, when you read through the condition that talks to planning, it provides for 3 different options. One, they could reduce. That is on page 2 of the determination called conditions of approval.
Okay, what number?
This would be condition number 5 on parking, and you'll see that it provides, alternatively, the applicant can either use any or all of the following. They can reduce it by paying an in lieu fee. They can reduce the service floor area to match the amount of parking being supplied and reflect that change on updated floor plans, or they may reduce the required number of parking spaces by using
I think I lost you there. It was on page 2?
of the original director's determination that's dated September 15th. Within the provisions of the specific plan and the parking standards that are contained therein.
Okay, thank you. But, oh, okay. Yeah, we're going to need a quick break, but I guess this is I have a question for our city attorney. This seems to be a project that has changed dramatically since it was first public hearing in September, all the way through past our hearing in January, all the way to now. And it strikes me that the concessions that are being made by the applicant, had this gone on in the beginning, maybe we wouldn't even be here today. But I seem to recall, I don't remember the name of the case, I don't think it was Lincoln Place, but when a project changes so dramatically, isn't there a court holding to the fact that it has to go back and start with the project you're really going to, the project that was approved and once appealed is not the one that's in front of us right now?
Well, I think that would be a call for you. Staff is recommending that they feel this project in its main components is substantially similar to what they, as I understood, I heard them earlier, they're not changing their findings, they're not changing their conditions. So based on the size of it, whatever, they feel they're finding
But it's a different
substantially the same
project. Their findings may still apply, but they're just adapting their findings to an entirely different project. I mean, we had so much talk about noise, and we have the community marshaling their voices, and now, it's all going to be covered now. And they had concerns about the time, and well, that's going to change now. It's only 10 p.m. to service of alcohol, and we're going to have valet parking now, and all this. I mean, it seems to be a dramatically different project to me. I mean, I certainly had problems with it in January, but this is a different project that we have now. We're going to take a short break because we need to before we go any further, but I would like some guidance on whether or not the fact that the project is so changed, does that require it to go back for a public hearing on the project that's actually going forward right now? And we'll take a short break right now because I think somebody else...
Let me just add, after the break, but just one thing, if I might, Ms. Fallon. Would you also clarify when we get back, what can we accept from the floor, from the applicant, all these different condition changes without any that are different than been presented in our documents or that came before? Example,
You mean the voluntary?
like the valet parking, which says one thing in the documents, and this is another presentation. Can we? I'm going to hold that when we come back.
Okay.
All right.
The scenes from the last thing. I believe we were left with the issue is how much can a project change before it's required to go back for the public hearing and have a strong look where everybody knows exactly what's going to go on, because it seems like this project has changed several times, even since the September hearing before the zoning administrator, and certainly it's changed since our January hearing, and now apparently it changed just a couple weeks ago. So
I'm not going to speak in the hypothetical. I'll speak to this project.
okay,
I mean, talking to staff and my review of the project, there is not intensity of use. The the general size, I mean, the size is the same, square footage is the same. So you have the use and the size is the same. Yes, it's enclosed, but I do remember from the prior hearing that one of the things that was stated by staff was that to meet the mitigation measure that no noise is going to leave the site, they may very well be required to enclose that. So their new enclosure is a response to the comments they heard, I believe, and I think that the modifications are not so great that this project, and in any case, you would have no authority to send it back. What you're being asked to do is agree with staff's recommendation that you can approve this project or not. I did talk to Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, who has some familiarity with the case that I think you were referring to. It is
What was the name of that case? Just for my own
Let's see if she remembers
edification,
the
because I
exact-
couldn't remember the name myself.
Amy Brothers. It was the Society of Richard Nutra. It was a project in Westwood. Are we talking about the same thing?
I think so.
Okay, and so in that case, the project was a density bonus case. Portions of the case came to the APC, perhaps for design review or project permit compliance. Other portions went to the CPC. And what was approved at the CPC was not actually what was presented at the APC. In fact, the developer diminished the amount of affordable units, but ended up getting the same on-menu bonuses. And the court decided that a writ was in order and that the project was not the same as what had originally been presented.
Okay. I knew there was a case like that, I just couldn't remember the name. All right, I guess the second area of inquiry for this commission is the imposition of conditions. I can't say, I don't know, but conditions such as only beer and wine and 1 year review and roof over the rooftop built to acoustical measures to prevent sound from going out, and service of alcohol only till 10 p.m., and valet parking, and all these other things that were not originally in the conditions approved by planning.
Well, first I would say it's not uncommon for new conditions to be added during planning commissions based on, the testimony you hear and whether or not you feel it's necessary to add those conditions to be able to make the findings. So that, I think you would realize from your experience that's not uncommon. I would say as to whether or not you can impose any given condition, we would need to talk about each one individually. Valet, I think that absolutely is something that would be within your purview to require if you find that you can't make one of these findings related to, for example, a CUB permit has a finding that the project is basically not going to cause a detriment to the neighborhood. I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it right in front of me. But so if you find that that having valet service will help avoid some of the testimony you've heard is that it's not parking like Santa Monica and Culver City in this area, and the experience these neighbors have, or the people that have testified, is that people going to restaurants park in the neighborhoods, and they're loud when they come out, et cetera, et cetera. And if you believe that valet service would avoid that as a nuisance, and so you can make the finding for the CUB, then I think that's within your authority to impose that condition.
This Commissioner Marjolie's question in my mind is these are all things that the applicant has put forward voluntarily. These are not conditions, that we're developing to make a finding. And it seems to me like if we could continue to evolve the submittal the way we have been. There's this whole list of things, including, new plans were submitted with new physical conditions that were not in there previously. It seems to me like this is similar, where the applicant is actually coming forward with a slightly changed project description. And it's not that we're not making these findings.
I understand that. I think I understood the question to be, could you impose it? And I'm saying, I think legally that's the type of condition you can pose if you can make the findings. If you wanted to impose a finding that, that they can't sell alcohol after 10, I would advise that's preempted by state law, and you could not impose that condition. So I was trying to respond to Commissioner Halper's question. You have to look at these entitlements that are being requested and determine if you can make the findings. If you think you can't make the findings, then you can deny the project. But it's up to you. If you want to add another condition because you think,
But I'm saying we're not being, as I understand it, we're not being asked to add a condition, and we're not trying to make a finding based on this. We're saying the project description has changed. The applicant has come here tonight and said, my project serves, I'm no longer applying for a full beer and wine license for the CUB. My project is a beer and wine only, and the hours of operation are 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. And that's not what's in the application. And it's a change that the applicant is making, not that the commissioners are conditioning the project on.
and I understand, I think.
My question really was, this is not, these conditions that the applicant has put forward are voluntary. And you, at an earlier time, I remember your ruling was that we can't enforce voluntary conditions. So that's what I was really asking you.
But I'm saying that some voluntary conditions you could. If they had a whole list of voluntary conditions and you wanted to impose them, and it's something that you could legally impose, then we can enforce those, and you can make those part of the project.
Thank you.
And then at that point, it doesn't become a voluntary condition. It's really the condition being put on the project.
Okay, so now we've closed the public hearing and we can have discussion.
Maybe, Simon, can you help me on this? I mean, I feel like I'm being, I feel like my question is being characterized, continues to be characterized as a condition we're placing on the applicant, as opposed to a change in the project description.
The project hasn't changed. It's being refined by your sort of the appeal process. So the project itself is sort of as for use for a certain square footage under these sort of entitlements, requesting it. If you want to narrow the hours of operation, you have the ability to do that if you can make the connection to the finding. That's where it comes in. And the project didn't change. It keeps getting narrowed down. Every time a project goes through the planning process and public hearing process, what they initially apply for versus what the staff might grant in the initial decision is different than what the project, when it moves through and it goes to exactly an appellate body, might be modified. And so it will always be modified. It's just, usually you cannot grant something greater than what they initially requested. If it's a narrowing or tightening down based on findings and relationships to the entitlement they're asking for, you can change the project. But you couldn't suddenly change this to an auto dealership. Let's just say, in this example, it's not a change. It's the same use, it's the same sort of square footage, and under the entitlements, we're not really focused, and we're just looking at the entitlements they're requesting for. So that's sort of our framework. If it were something that, you were a design review board, you need a completely different change in the project, and the findings were for a design review with these specific changes to it, you could still make the changes because they refined it based on, comments that were made at the previous public hearing. You understand the projects can evolve through the public hearing process and the appeal process. It doesn't set it back to step one just because they've changed the project. If they're narrowing it down or they refined certain elements to it, and they're still within the entitlements that were originally granted, it still falls there. So there's room for changes, or else you wouldn't be able to make any changes to a project at this point.
But that's fine. I'm just trying to clarify that we're not the ones who are making these changes. We did not request them, and we are not applying them as conditions.
Yet. You haven't made an action yet.
No,
they're
for the
there
record,
for your consideration.
It seems more accurate for the record. The applicant has requested a change in the project description, not in the big things, but certainly in a number of the findings and the discussion and the background and the actual description of the project as a full alcohol serving establishment, that's no longer what the applicant is proposing.
If I could, Theodore Irving, and I'll just add to what Simon was saying. So it is kind of the evolving process, and yes, you didn't ask that the change be made, but in listening to the community and listening to those people in opposition, this is the response to it, so that we can move to a point where if we could get an agreement or get a decision made. So this happens all the time, as Simon pointed out. A project comes in, it's huge. The applicant may consult with the council office, consult the neighborhood council, get suggestions from those, and then find himself having to tweak the project down a little to satisfy those he's spoken with. So this is part of the process. Again, if we were to ratchet it up some, that's a whole different thing. But as he's trying to fit the project and to be acceptable by the community, this is what we're arriving at right now. And this is part of the process. And it's not something that you've indicated, but it just shows the listening and awareness of the applicant and his ability to compromise. And this is where we are.
Kathy Phelan, City Attorney's Office. I would add that the project for your consideration is in the staff report, is a site plan. If you find that something that has been offered by the applicant is like another change to the project, you're reviewing the project that was submitted in the staff report. That's what you're deciding on. If you want to accept a condition and add it on, that's something we can talk about. But the project you're reviewing is what's in the staff report and what is submitted with the attachments to the staff report.
And again, just tagging on to what the city attorney says, if you find yourself you're not in a position to provide findings for a certain condition, then it's your prerogative to reject it. And so if that's in front of you as well, we have to do that as well as decision makers. If we're not able to make a finding, then we're not able to move forward with a project. And so if you find yourself in that position, it's just part of the process.
Commissioner Halper. Excuse me. One of the findings we got to make tonight.
Into the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the findings we have to make tonight, in granting, and I'm going to read this, in granting a project permit compliance review in the Venice coastal zone, the approving authority shall have to make the findings in section 11.5.7 and the following finding. 1, that the Venice Coastal Development Project is compatible in scale and character with the existing neighborhood, and the Venice Coastal Development Project would not be materially detrimental to the adjoining lots or the immediate neighborhood. That's the finding you've got to make to get a coastal development permit. So I think that's the key finding that I've got to make tonight, and I'd like to discuss that with our colleagues here.
Commissioner Donovan, when we came, I wasn't in favor of rehearing this particular case again, but here it is. And I was concerned at the time that we first heard it about the noise. I was concerned about the parking. I was concerned about the traffic. So now we hear that the noise can maybe be taken care of. So that gives me some comfort. The parking is still a major issue, but with valet parking and a $252,000 contribution to the in lieu fees, maybe that helps as well. I am persuaded by Council District's 11 concept that the restaurant that's been there has been operating unlawfully for some time, and that certainly is not a good background to be providing liquor licenses, the ability to sell liquor. And the idea that conditioning it so that there's no alcohol for the first year to give the applicant time to show that he's a good citizen, he's going to follow the rules, that it's going to be asset to the community. That would be something that, at least for the neighborhood who's concerned about the issues of more alcohol service and things like that, it would give them some comfort. And maybe it strikes me from this whole thing that had perhaps the applicant somehow been able to get together with the neighborhood a little bit closer. I know there's been some efforts to do that, but if they could have solved the noise problem early on, could have reduced what they wanted in liquor, all these kinds of things, and maybe we wouldn't even be here. And maybe in a year's time, the applicant could prove himself to the neighborhood. The neighborhood can watch how the place is run, and then we revisit the issue of service of alcohol at this place. And this would allow, there's a restaurant that's about operating there anyway, so something can operate there. So that strikes me as a good idea. I'm not sure about the roof deck, whether or not they should have a second floor or not. On one hand, obviously, if you don't have a second floor, then you don't have to worry about the noise coming off the roof. On the other hand, if it's going to be totally enclosed, it gives the applicant an opportunity to have a better going concern, and then if a year comes down, he's be able to get the ability to serve alcohol, then he'll be all set up for that, and things will work. So I guess I can go back and forth on whether or not it should be a second floor or not. It's not a situation where there's no other second floor, two-story buildings in the area or anything like that, so I'm not as concerned about that. But that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now. I would not like to see a reduction of the in-lieu fees, even if they do have valet parking there, because we desperately, we've got a plan. Our CD11 is really going forward, and then we're going to finally use that money. Then I'd want to get as much in there because that area needs parking like there's no tomorrow. So that's what I'm thinking. But I'm, as always, very interested in what my fellow commissioners are thinking about this.
Commissioner Margulies, and I will. I agree with most of what Commission President Donovan has mentioned. I'm still on a little shaky ground of understanding, given that we don't seem to have any impact on the ABC or the alcohol license process, how we can apply a condition that says that we'll put them on probation for a year.
My understanding of what the idea would be is to not issue a CUB. Is that correct?
Right.
So
At all. Yeah, they'd have to come back.
Excuse me. I think what's in front of you, you do have the option to reduce it from 4-line to beer and wine. I know they offered it, but there have been situations where appellate bodies have actually made that a condition because they thought that the 4-line of alcohol sales was too much for the neighborhood, so they have reduced that request. So you do have that in front of you. In terms of probation, you do have an option to have them come back under a plan approval whereby they show proof that they've been a good neighbor.
All right. The other thing that I'm a little concerned about, my sense is that the noise issues are contained if the second floor is completely acoustically contained. But the thing that concerns me is that the second level floor plan on the March 16th drawings show 3 sets of double doors all opening out to what appears to be a terrace. The plan is not clear where that enclosure is happening. Can I ask for clarification on that?
Well, before we reopen anything for further testimony, let me ask you this. I suppose there could be a condition that if you don't want the double doors, we could make a condition that the upper floor area is not going to have anything that's going to open up to the neighborhood that will transmit sound.
That would be the condition, that there's no access to the exterior from the second floor.
Oh, okay.
dining area. Actually,
Commissioner?
if I'm reading the plan correctly, I like the idea of a step back from the kind of street line. But yeah, that would, the area that is currently shown with some plants or something sitting on it would not be accessible to diners.
Commissioner Kevin Jones from LA City Planning. If you look at page A2.02,
Yes.
you'll notice that there is a doorway near the center of that drawing, and perhaps the applicant could make some clarification as to whether or not that doorway is similar to what appears to maybe be a window opening instead, such as a casement window. Are those casement windows or are they patio
I'm
doors?
seeing door swings, double door swings. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3 sets of dashed double door swings facing south.
Commissioner Donovan, before we ask what the
But that's my
clarification-
question. When you look at the doorway that's up above, it's not quite the same. I'm asking for clarification as to whether or not that's the same or are they different?
Well, Commissioner Donovan, the issue is Commissioner Margulies is talking about them not having access to the rooftop outside of the enclosed area. And so that, to me, that doesn't matter what their plans show, it's what the commission would want. So if that would be something that you would need to have, then you would make that as a condition. And then it doesn't matter what their plans say, their plans will show that in the future.
Commissioner Hopper again. I'm going back to the finding we're going to have to make on a coastal development permit. And the piece that I'm particularly concerned with, we have to make a representation that the project will not be materially detrimental to the adjoining lots or the immediate neighborhood. Is that what, that would be the goal to achieve? Is that possible?
Commissioner Donovan, I think if we are not allowing them a CUB for the first year until they show that they're good neighbors, if they're going to make them enclose the upper story so that no sound can get out, we're going to make them pay in lieu fees plus provide valet parking, and then I think we are mitigating the potential harmful effects of the enterprise, which is otherwise permitted in the area. It's not like they're trying to dump a restaurant into, completely surrounded by.
A restaurant in that proximity to the residential properties there, people coming and going at that time of night when it would be in full operation. Can that be mitigated by what you're saying?
Commissioner Halper, I think they volunteered to limit their hours of operation to 10 p.m., which seems like a reasonable hour for people to be coming and going from a restaurant. I believe we heard some testimony that I actually think is probably worthwhile from people living in the neighborhood. The backside of Hampton is a very the ocean side of Hampton is kind of depopulated. There's not much going on that street, and coming in a couple doors from the corner and having another beneficial use with some could actually increase the amount of people walking on that street, and if we can mitigate the noise, if the noise is not unreasonable, I don't know that, I would hope the community would not have a problem with more people walking, moving in the neighborhood in a positive way, even at 10 o'clock at night. But we have to feel certain that we have done everything else we need to mitigate the possible detriment to the neighborhood.
And at the end of the day, if the applicant doesn't prove to be a good neighbor, then they're not going to get their CUB a year from now. And basically, even though it's been illegal, we had a restaurant operating there for many years now. So we're going to give them.
Are you indicating that this restaurant will be built, and then in a year from now, a decision will be made on the effect on the neighborhood? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, well, there'll be a plan approval within a year. Obviously, the neighbors and are aware of this. If this turns out to be a good place and there's no problems, then there's not going to be an issue. All of a sudden, if the neighbors are constantly having to call for service with LAPD and they're having all these other kinds of issues, I mean, certainly we see it can be easily documented by them. And if they come in and they say they have not been a good neighbor, they have not, they've been it's been a problem for the neighborhood, and then
let me get it clear for myself. Are you suggesting that the applicant build the structure and go into an operation which will be conditioned, and then in a year from now, with the structure in place and the conditions in place, then we make a determination whether it's drawing board and come in with a project that will work for the community, with the community involved.
Yes.
well, I will observe that there's just 3 of us here, and whatever we do has to be unanimous,
Yes.
or there is no action. And if there is no action, then the zoning administrator's decisions will stand. I see a lot of nodding over there. I like that. I guess we need to hear from Commissioner Margulies. What are you thinking about this?
She's the lady from Venice.
My main concern is that we make findings that are justified and defensible, and that I don't like being in the position of making decisions and then having them subsequently overturned. And I'm not feeling like, I feel like on the one hand we're told there are conditions we can place on this, and then on the other hand, every time we ask about a condition, we're told no, you can't put that kind of condition on the project. It seems, I have to say, I think. As a resident of Venice, I appreciate having a diversity of restaurants and destinations. I think it does, certainly adds to the quality of life of our neighborhood. It is disarming and alarming to hear to sort of hear in real time evolution during a hearing that improvements that are made, and I think. President Donovan, I think this is also disturbing to you that the applicant couldn't make these changes in time to give the community the benefit of having discussion and making sure that we came to this meeting tonight to resolve as many differences as possible. The nature of this kind of discussion where the project changes every 3 months physically, and there's a certain note of desperation here, I'd have to say, of yes, and now that we're here in this room in this hearing, yes, now we'll consider these other limitations on the project. I consider most, with all of the limitations we've heard in the conditions, the really making efforts to solve the parking problems to the extent possible, and all the other solutions we heard really have to do with the city doing their part in building the infrastructure for parking, in making the physical changes to contain the noise. I think this is really working towards a solution. In reducing the alcohol consumption to beer and wine and the hours of operation from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. These all seem like the kind of good neighborhood restaurant you'd like to have in your neighborhood, where it's not open until 2 a.m. and it's a kind of place you'd want to go as someone who you'd like to walk down there or ride your bike. We cannot, this is not a design review board, and we can't comment on the physical design. So, on the one hand, it seems to me like at the end of however many hours we've been here tonight, we've achieved a lot of what the community has asked for.
Well, we're here basically, what's in front of us now, we can do nothing and the ZA decisions are going to stand. We can grant the appeal essentially for the same reasons as we did on January 7th. Noise not being as much of a consideration at this point, but it would be still about the sales of alcohol and those kinds of things. Or we can grant and deny in part and impose what other further conditions we feel are appropriate to mitigate any of the impacts. So that's kind of where we are. So I'm hearing from Commissioner Halper that he's more inclined to grant the appeal at this point.
The reason it is, there's three of us here. We've got to come to a unanimous conclusion. If we go into the process of developing conditions that we think will work, one of the things that concern me when we talk about parking, we talk about valet parking. Well, where is it? Where is that going to be? I heard testimony that there is no local location for that. I would want to know where that facility is, and would it be able to accommodate what we're talking about? But I don't think I have enough information to make an affirmative action here.
Okay. Well, I don't think you want us to do nothing.
No, because if we don't do anything, right, we're back to scratch.
Oh no, the project's going to go forward without any of the extra conditions.
So I would ask this of my fellows here, if someone feels strongly about somehow salvaging the project at some level, make that motion and we'll go from there, because I think that would be better than saying having a split decision and not having any recourse then.
Well,
so I'll leave it to you.
I guess at this point I'm comfortable with either granting the appeal for essential reasons, or I'm also comfortable with granting and denying in part, which would involve denying the CUB and grant basically the compliance. I guess we would grant the compliance review so that it would basically legalize the restaurant at this point, and but denying the CUB, and we can impose other conditions. So I guess I can go either way, granting the appeal entirely and let them work it out and come up with a project that everybody is going to buy into, including the neighborhood, or deny the CUB and impose additional conditions and grant compliance review so they can operate the restaurant legally now. I can go either way, so it's going to depend on you, Commissioner Margulies, which way you're going to want to go.
Well, I'm of a similar mind. I think it's really Commissioner Halper. If you can have faith that they'll have to come up with a valet parking solution that will work for them.
Well, I would, before I would want to support that, I'd want to know where it is, whether it could accommodate the what we're talking about in terms of the volume of parking. Right now, it's just an offer of, yeah, we'll give you valet parking. Okay, that would, in my opinion, if there was valet parking, would go a long way of solving the parking problem. But I don't have any assurance that there's such a location, or that it could accommodate the level of parking that we're talking about.